things. And as the guys have pointed out, the world's view of what's acceptable has a large impact and bearing on our decision to do that. And also our emotions have a large impact and bearing on our decision to do that. All right? So, how are we going to get beyond this resistance that we have? That's the real question. And it becomes very plain, doesn't it? That basically we're going to have to feel some emotions. Aren't we? We're also going to have to feel our false beliefs, aren't we? And see them as actually false. Otherwise, we're going to assume they're true and keep on acting upon what we believe to be true. So these are key things that we need to choose to do. But what I wanted to do for a moment is to focus your attention on why we choose to have a lack of faith, why we choose to resist faith, right? So if we examine those reasons, just rub that out. So if we go, why? Now there's two issues here. Firstly, the question is, why do we lack faith right now in these emotional and spiritual things? But then there's also a related question, which is, why do I resist developing faith? You know, it's one thing to already now have a lack of faith myself, isn't it? That's one thing. It's quite another as to why I choose to continue to stay in that condition. They're two really separate questions, aren't they, in a way? Related, but separate. So, why do we lack faith? Well, let's have a look at why. Usually, during our childhood, what happened was this. We were promised things which were not fulfilled. The promises were not fulfilled. Whether that be mummy saying something to us that finished up not being true, and daddy saying something to us that was not true, or the school teacher saying something to us not true, or other children saying things that are not true, and we trusted them, and then we trusted them but in the end they didn't happen, and then we felt a terrible feeling of disappointment. But rather than feeling the feeling of disappointment, what did we do with it? We stored it up as a protective layer in order to examine the next thing that we were promised. And the more promises that were unfulfilled that happened in our life, the more we finished up storing up this disappointed emotion, to the point now where we feel disillusioned with whatever is promised. And we feel that it's not logical to have any faith in what people promise. Right? And because with technology and other things like that, that particular thing did not happen. In other words, with technology, the things we're promised generally come true, right? They're established to be true, and then we use them and we use them again. And like 100 years ago, or a couple of 100 years ago, when the phone was created, initially nobody believed it was possible, but after a while everybody started using them, and by the mid-1920s, you know, all the richies had one, and then by the mid-1940s, pretty much everyone in a developed country had one, right? And now you carry 2 or 3 of them with you generally. You know, one family might have 5 of them all on them. All carrying them around, and you, with confidence, pick them up and dial a number and expect to get exactly the person that you've dialed on the other end, do you not? You've got complete faith that will happen. So you've got complete faith in technology, the things that are physical, but when people are involved, now you don't have as much faith, do you? Can you see that? And that's caused by this constant thing that's happened over the period of your life. that there's been disappointment and disappointment here, disappointment there. Can't trust this person here, can't trust that person there. But what's happened? You did not release the emotion. So what you do is you take that emotion into your next interaction. And into your next interaction. And then the more interactions you have where there is a failure on the part of a person to provide any evidence of faith, the more you take that into the next interaction. So you end up with a build-up of emotion inside of you that says, don't trust people. Isn't that not true? All right? Now, interestingly enough, we haven't had a relationship with God, but we don't trust God. So where does that come from? Well, obviously it comes from the fact that we have a build-up of emotion about trusting people. Because we've not yet experimented with our trust in God at this point. So again, we're imposing our relationship with people on God. We basically are presuming that God's going to be the same as the people that we've interacted with. Going to have the same feelings. He's going to promise things and not fulfill them, and so forth. So that's why we lack faith, right? Now, pretty much everyone on the planet could say they've had those experiences, right? All right. But that doesn't answer this question. Why do I resist developing faith? Does it? Just because we lack it, if we know we lack it, and we know that it's probably not that logical when it comes to God to lack it, and yet we refuse to develop it, there's got to be other reasons that cause our desire to not develop it, is what I'm suggesting to you. What are those reasons? If we go to Nada and to maybe straight across to Joanne after that. Yep.
I feel it's because we would have to feel all those emotions from our childhood, from those people.
Yes.
We would rather resist that.
So number one is I'm going to have to feel all of this added up disappointments.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of our disappointment isn't just disappointment in terms of a brief sort of emotion either, is it? It's like, it's pretty major sadness inside of us, isn't it? So basically all of my disappointments, if I put it in brackets there, large amount of sadness is going to have to be felt, isn't it? And on top of the sadness, there's probably some anger, right, as well. That's probably going to have to be felt too before I can even get to my sadness. So most people go, well, hang on a sec, you're asking me to feel a whole heap of stuff without there being any seeming, at this stage, any seeming potential good that can come of it, right? And be blowed if I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'd rather just store it all inside of me and just carry it on with me for the rest of my life. That's what I'd rather do. And so we do. That's what we do. We just store all this disappointment. And we're exhausted by this disappointment. But the reality is we carry it around so much we can barely trust the people we say we love the most, let alone anybody else. Isn't it? Barely trust even the people we say we love the most. So one reason why I resist developing some faith is that it means that I'm probably going to have to feel a whole heap of emotion, and I really don't want to feel that emotion. That's the choice I've made. I've made a choice to resist feeling of emotion that is linked to my development of faith. Right? So that's a big, big thing. Anything else you can think of? We're over at Joanne.
Yes. I find that I resist that so much that I actually set people up to disappoint me without intentionally thinking through it. I find I accidentally maybe do things that set people up.
Yeah. How many of you find yourself doing that at times? Because it is a common thing. It's a pretty common thing. Why do we set people up to disappoint us? It's quite obvious, isn't it? Because it reinforces the fact that we shouldn't have to have any faith. That it reinforces our desire to not have to deal with the issues. Yeah. Yep. So Jana, and if we go up the back, yep. I can't see your name. Sorry, Trina, is it? Thanks.
You pray for things, and you pray and pray and pray, and
Yep.
they don't happen, then you give up.
So, how is that resisting developing faith?
Because you're giving up, you just feel so hopeless, you give up.
Yeah, see, for me, if I'm praying for something and I'm not receiving it, I would be making the assumption that if God is good, and I always make that assumption, and I'm not receiving what I think I'm praying for, then it probably indicates that what I'm praying for is not as good as I think it is. Does that make sense? That would be my assumption. So I don't sort of see the linkage there between those two conditions. Does that make sense?
It does, yep.
I do see that we may have asked people for things in our past that have caused us to have that particular emotion, but I can't see how it relates to God, because if I'm not receiving things from God, then to me it means that God doesn't want to give them. And if God doesn't want to give them, there must be a reason. And I always think, well, God's always got reasons for being loving, so I presume that the reason is loving, rather than presuming it's unloving. So the question I need to ask you in return is, why do you presume that what you're asking for is loving? Do you see what I'm saying? Because if you presume that what you're asking for is loving, but you're not receiving it, then I can understand why you're disappointed, right? But the way I look at it is, if I'm praying for something and I'm not receiving it, then I presume that what I'm asking for is not loving. Because I know God's going to give it if God can. If it's in harmony with love and truth, God will definitely give it. So, do you see what I'm saying?
I do,
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Jada, thanks.
I was just going to ask, does it come back to, like if we develop faith, our life's probably, could change significantly, and we don't want to do that?
Yes, there's going to be significant changes. Let's actually, it's bigger than significant, isn't it? It's everything will change. Now, for the majority of us, how do we feel about that? Well, we've established already last couple of days, we're not happy with that. And we know that everything will possibly change. So therefore it's better to not have any faith that anything will, so that way I can avoid the whole process of change, right? And this gets again down to my exercise of my will, does it not? I am choosing to not change, and I know that if I have faith, I'll probably change, and so it's better to not have faith. That way I can have doubt, and while I have doubt, I don't have to change. I can just talk about things, and many of you do this, I notice. You talk about this truth, that truth, this truth, that truth, this truth, that truth, right? In your interactions with each other and also with others that are not here, but you don't actually engage them. You just talk about them. Well, that's a person who has not got the faith to actually do them. But why are you talking about them with others then? Isn't that a bit hypocritical? Trying to encourage others to do what you haven't done? Isn't that hypocritical? Yes, it is. But why do you do that? Oh, well, that's also because I want a whole heap of other people to come along on the ride with me before I do it myself. That's why I want it done. I want us all to join together and do it as one, rather than me have to do it alone. Right? So there's a whole heap of reason for that as well. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, big point that. Everything's going to have to change. Right up the back, thanks.
The people around me don't have faith in God, and they don't have anything to support me because I feel pretty weak about it.
So you're really saying, I'll be different.
Yeah, and scared
Isn't
of being different, because when you've been different in the past, I've been, belittled or shot down or
Yeah,
troubled.
in the past, people have died for being different. Yeah. All through the Dark Ages, if you were a medium, you got strung up, right? You were, if they find out, you're going to die, right? All through the Dark Ages, if you were a homosexual in a Christian religious area, then you would have been killed pretty much immediately, right? So being different, very dangerous, right? It's even threatens your life being different. So we have these fears that are based really terrors about being different. Most of us want to conform to the world. But as I've said to you a few days ago, conforming to the world is actually a pretty bad thing, because it means that you're never going to get any further than what the world is. So conforming to the world is never going to make your life happier than what the world has. The happiness that the world has will be yours. The suffering the world has will be yours. The pain the world has will be yours if you conform to the world. So logically, it's not a very logical thing to do, but because of the fears, particularly from the past, whenever we were different, the minimum generally is that we were ridiculed and often violently punished. And historically, we have spirits around us who have been murdered for being different. So naturally, there's a lot of fear about being different, which is obviously motivating our choice and decision. Now, can you see already what we're building up here is a series of feelings, series of emotions that are preventing us from developing faith. So we all lack faith, right? Because of this, for pretty much the same reasons, we all lack faith. But resisting developing faith is an act of our will. Now, this might not have involved our will very much, right? This might have involved the will of others and how the world thinks and everything else, why we lack faith. But why we resist faith does involve our will. That is something we can change. We can choose to change this. And we're not. We're not choosing to change it because we have investments in emotions from the past staying within us, which actually are very harmful to us, actually. They stop us from doing a whole heap of very good things with our life, but we hold on to them. And we choose to hold on to them. So what I would like to get you to understand from this particular discussion is the reason why we lack faith is different to the reason why we resist developing it. And the reason why we lack faith, while it might be tied to a whole heap of childhood events, the reality is we only lack faith in certain things. We don't lack faith generally in physical things, do we? So we have faith in physical things to the point that we will trust our very lives with those particular things we have faith in, but we lack faith in anything to do with people, emotions, etc. Anything related to where we were disappointed. That's where we lack faith. Now, that's the case for the majority of people on this planet. We have a large amount of faith in scientifically physical things, but we have a large amount of doubt in people, lack of trust in people, lack of faith in people. That's our condition. But that still doesn't answer this question: why do I resist developing faith in God? Right? Because God's not people. Right? And that gets down to having to feel a whole heap of emotions. But you know what we're not seeing is that choosing to not feel emotion is actually out of harmony with love, so therefore a sin. Choosing to not change is out of harmony with love of self and love of others, therefore sin. Choosing to be the same as the world is choosing to be like the world, and the world is sinning, so that means we will sin. So we're basically saying that I'd rather sin than develop faith. That's what we're really saying. I'd rather sin than develop faith. And can you see that choice has to change if we're going to have any faith, and therefore we're, stop being resistive to the development of faith. Can you see that? Is there any questions about that? Joy, thanks.
Doesn't it presuppose that I want to have a relationship with God, otherwise there's no need to develop faith?
Oh, I agree, yeah. Where did I put my razor? Oh, there it is. Yeah, I agree. It does presuppose that you want to. There's little point in developing faith in God if you don't want to have faith in God or a relationship with God. So, of course, this does depend. But remember, we said at the beginning of our discussion this week that if we don't have a relationship with God, then we're not connecting with anyone with a higher source. So what's going to be a result of that? We're going to get the world's... So there's the negative effect, if you like, of not choosing to develop faith in God and not having a relationship with God is the fact that we can't receive an education from God, which means that our only education about love can come from the world. And what's the results of that? Well, what the world's getting. So yes, you can choose it, but is it wise? Is it wise to not choose? Is it wise to choose this? Lack of faith? No, it's not. And it's not wise to remain in a state where you don't want to develop it, because in the end you'll just get what the world gets. So it makes no sense to me to do it, but yes, God's given you certainly the will that you can exercise so that you do that, but the world is already demonstrating the result of will exercised in that direction. Yeah. If we come down to Felix, thanks.
With the second question, isn't a really big one that refusal to actually make a test, say, of what you say about a particular law or something and really test it out and experiment?
Yeah, it is a refusal to experiment. So that's a refusal to make mistakes, isn't it?
Yeah, refusal to make mistakes. Yeah. Experiment and make mistakes.
Yeah, so why are we worried about making mistakes?
Just that, it'll all go bad.
Well, it's more than that usually. Like, what does the world do to you when you make a mistake?
Yeah, punish you.
Man, you get hammered, don't you?
Yeah.
Right. God doesn't hammer you when you make a mistake. The law is already in operation and the mistake's happened. God doesn't hammer you further for doing it. But the world has this terrible view. You make a mistake and, man, you hear about it for the rest of your life. Don't you? That's what we're avoiding. Yeah. We're avoiding the attack.
Yeah.
Yep. So one of the reasons why I resist developing faith is really because of the avoidance of attack.
But I know when I experimented, it was also like a fear that of like if I get it wrong, then and if I'm wrong with my experiment, which I turned out to be wrong. Yeah. So I learned something that the law of the results would be bad. Like the law of compensation would be too bad, and it's like I'm fear of even making a mistake with God. Yeah, but I did do it anyway. Isn't that really again like being afraid of mummy or daddy punishing you in the end? Well, because God doesn't punish you, the laws already adjust you. So if you're already out of harmony with the laws of love, then the laws are already attempting to adjust you. Where you are right now is as bad as it's going to be. Does that make sense? It can't get worse unless you choose purposefully to do further things out of harmony with love. Well, I chose to do something which I thought was getting around my addiction and in harmony with love. But you did that because in your soul you believed that what was being said to you wasn't true. So that belief was already there, and the law was already operating on that belief. You were already getting the results of breaking the law. I got it quicker. That's good.
Yeah, by choosing it, that's the beauty.
Okay.
You get to learn the truth better. But this is a big issue. We're afraid of attack either from God or from others. We're just afraid of getting punished for the choices that we're making. Yep, very, very big problem. If we go up to Maxine, thanks. Yeah, and then down to Tara. Just.
I was raised in the Catholic system belief, not that we went to church or anything, but Mum was quite strong with that. And
Yep.
would it be a lack of faith because of the religious beliefs have confused us with?
I don't think they've confused you. I think what they've done is they've been imposed upon you in a very unloving manner, and that has made you angry rather than confused. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, when we get belief systems that are obviously unloving from a child's perspective imposed upon the child grows up feeling a lot of resistance to those belief systems as a result. You know, this is why many of you have rejected Christianity, right? Because it's been forced upon you as a child, right? Which is actually breaking one of God's laws, the law of free will, not being able to make your own choices and decisions. Right? You often also observe hypocrisy in religion, where, you know, they say one thing but do another, where your mum says one thing, she does another, right? And then, of course, we get angry about that. How dare she do that, right? She says one thing, does another. Jeez, that's not very nice. And she's blaming the religion for things or blaming God for things when she's saying, I've got to love God, and then she says she loves God, but she doesn't seem to love me very much. And, you know, so we have a whole heap of things happen to us when we're brought up in a religion which demonstrate the hypocrisy of our parents. And then, of course, we get quite angry about it. But because we're not allowed to feel our anger about it, we call it confusion. And I don't think we're very confused. I think we're just very angry. Yeah. Tara.
So this morning I was feeling a lot of fear of some humiliation and attack from a teacher in grade 3.
Yeah.
And when I allowed myself to work through that, I kind of settled, and then I've had a lot of grief about, I feel truth maybe, of, I'm actually allowed to make a mistake. It's okay for me. So that would start to develop faith in the next mistake I make. I have more faith that it's okay
to make a mistake
and not be punished.
What is the only mistake from God's perspective?
To sin.
Yeah, to do something out of harmony with love or truth. That's the mistake. So not having knowledge is not a problem to God. You can know nothing and it's not a problem to God. Like a little baby knows nothing and yet God loves it. So you knowing nothing is not an issue.
No, it's just the humiliation, like you said, that
from
you
the
get
world.
from everyone else when you make a mistake.
Yeah. So to me, you're allowed to not know anything. I'm allowed to not know anything. We don't have to know everything. And in fact, it's impossible for us to know everything, right? Impossible. It's going to be impossible for the rest of your existence to not know everything. Like you will not know everything for the rest of your existence. Hopefully it will improve, like you'll get to know more, but not everything, because only God knows everything, right? And I think that's wonderful, because now I'm allowed to experiment with what I know. I'm allowed to make mistakes. The area where God's trying to correct us is, no, he's saying to us, look, you're allowed to make any mistake you want, but when you're out of harmony with love or truth, I've got laws that are going to correct you. Right, but you're allowed to make any mistake you want to make, and to God, a mistake in knowledge is where we all are already. So for God, that's not a mistake. He actually created us without the knowledge, so he doesn't even see that as a mistake. Otherwise, he would have created us with all knowledge of the universe, stuffed inside of us. Wouldn't he? Yeah. He would have had the ability potentially to do that. I don't know whether he would or not, but the reality is, if he's an infinite God, then he probably has the ability to do that, right? So why didn't he create us that way? He obviously created us the way He's created us because he built into us a desire to learn, the joy we get of learning. And most of us do have experienced that joy at different times. That joy we receive of learning something new and discovering it for the first time and then acting upon it and realising it's true. You know, that kind of joy would, if everything was stuffed into us right at the beginning, we would never understand that joy, ever. This joy of discovery. And God's placed, the Bible verse says, God's placed eternity into the heart of man so that he may never find out what the true God has done. You want me to say that again? God has placed eternity into the heart of man. In other words, He's created within you a desire to live forever. And then it says, so that you may never find out what the true God has done. In other words, you're never going to completely find out what God has done. That's why you need eternity. Right? And even then, you're still not completely find out everything God has done. And it's a way God created us. Now, that comes from the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. And the beauty of that understanding is that we realise, I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed to discover new things. I don't have to know everything. And any person who projects at me that I should have known before I know is out of harmony with love. Right? So, you know, all those people get on Facebook and laugh at other people who don't know this and don't know that, and all those people who, you know, get on the media and laugh at other people, you know, they're way out of harmony with love, because in the end of the day, we all don't know something. Or we could say it another way, we all know barely little, barely anything. Right? But it's wonderful that that's the way God's created us. But when it comes to developing our faith, this is something we can do. We can choose to do it. It's a choice that we need to make. And it's something like, honestly, it has such a large impact on the rest of your life that you'd be wise to do it. You think it has a large impact on your physical life. You think of all the good things that come from you having some faith. Right? If you had no faith in electronics, you would not have electricity, you would not have a phone, you would not have light, you would not have power, you would not probably, for most of you, have hot water, you would not even be able to wash yourself in hot water, for that matter. Oh, I'm smelling that. And then you know, if you think of all the different, that's just with power. You wouldn't fly. You wouldn't be able to go to other ends of the world. You have to do it via a ship of some kind. But of course, there's all electronics in the ships nowadays. So you have to get an old technological thing like a sailboat or something, right? Which most of you couldn't afford. Let's face it. And you just if we just keep listing all of the different things that we couldn't do, how much more restricted would your life be right now? Just if you didn't have faith in electronics. Right? Now, if that's the benefits that can come from just having faith in one physical thing, what do you think the benefits are going to be by having some faith in some moral and spiritual and ethical things? And faith with dealing with your emotions. The benefits must be greater given the fact that we're driven by our emotions. So there's got to be higher benefits than that. So this is what we need to contemplate. Monique, thanks.
Just following on from Tara's question, then are you saying that if we start removing each block that I have in my resistance to God, faith in God, faith in truth, faith in all the laws, like you said, it could take many, many years, like there might be like...
It could take years, but not necessarily, because remember, a lot of them are to do with the fact that it's really just a lack of faith in our parents or a lack of faith in other people, not God. So the key is distancing, like pulling apart the relationship between God and people. Like we make them the same. That's part of our problem. But go on.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes, that's sort of what I was trying to get at, that if there's that brick wall of all of, I just see it as a brick wall that I've got maybe hundreds of false beliefs about all these, about God, about truth, about the universe. And then if I start to take out one brick, like feel one emotion, then that might build some faith.
Definitely.
That one thing might be true that was untrue previously.
Yeah, well, even the contemplation that it might be true is better than believing it's not when it could be, isn't it? It's like somebody coming to you and giving you a phone and say, look, you can dial that, and you say, no, it's not true, throw it away. You'd throw it away, wouldn't you? But if somebody gave you a phone and they said, you can dial that and you can actually talk to Alex, you go, when you initially contemplate it, you go, maybe they're right. I'll try it and see. All right? There's the difference between believing something is untrue and believing in the potentiality of it being true, which is not the same as knowing that it's true. Once you've dialed it and you got Alex on the other end, then you'd know it's true, you see? And what I'm suggesting is we need to move from this instant dismissal that it's just untrue. Do you follow?
So that's like breaking down our justifications and all those lies.
Yep.
And actually breaking them down, well, actually like confronting them and actually testing whether they're true, whether they're actual lies or not, and
Correct.
Not being lazy.
Correct. Not just automatically believing they're true. Not just assuming they're true.
Or untrue.
Or untrue.
Being lazy and accepting, Jesus said, or AJ says they're true, so they must be true. Or
you're not going to accept it's truth if I say. You're not.
Exactly.
It's going to have to be a personal experience.
Exactly. And then there's no faith built if we're just all trusting you.
Yep.
Or there's no faith built if I'm just trusting my parents.
Or the world.
Yeah,
no faith built there either.
And nothing changes unless I actually start to pull a brick out and actually do something with it.
Correct.
All right, and then you're saying that maybe then I'll then have one good experience, and then I might get a bit excited or something.
Or a bad experience.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, but see, well, you will have either, won't you? Because if you're measuring something that's new, you will have a good or a bad experience, or you will have something happen which will at least inform you of the truth. So the answer might be, no, it's not true. Or the answer might be, yes, this is true. It could be either, but at least be open to the possibility of it being either. So this is where you close down, Monique.
Yeah, I did.
It's what you're saying to me up until that point, yes, spot on. Everything you're saying to me is spot on. But the problem is you're not going to do it while you believe you only want to have a good experience.
I'm blocked
see
to
what I'm
that.
saying?
Yeah.
So you and this is what the majority of us do, is we go, is it going to be pleasurable before I begin? I don't know. So what I'm going to do is not do it. I need to have a guarantee that it's going to be pleasurable before I begin. Can you give me this guarantee? And I say, no, I can't. I don't know what experiment you're going to engage, and I don't know what the answer is going to be with some of these experiments that you engage. But wouldn't it be better that you know the truth than whether the truth is the answer is no, or whether the truth is the answer is yes? Isn't it better to know it than not know it?
It is. But I'm blocked to even seeing what, could you give an example on testing something that I could have a bad result about?
Well, that's exactly what Felix described the other day. You remember what he described?
Yeah.
He went off and he decided, no, feeding addictions is good. AJ doesn't know what he's talking about. Feeding addictions is good. I'm going to go off and feed my addictions, but I'm going to measure the results this time. See, before I'm just ignoring the results, but I'm going to measure the results and see what happens. Measure the results. Yeah, it's not very good. So now there's a higher likelihood that what I've been told is true. So now what I can do is not feed my addictions and see what the results are. And, results are good. So that means feeding my addictions, not a good thing. And I know that now because I've tried it. right? So an answer to the negative or an answer to the positive is better than no answer at all, is what I'm suggesting to you. And most of you want to only have the answers where you think in advance that everything's going to work out great. That's what you want. And that's what stops you from engaging the process of experimentation. Does that make sense? Paul, thanks.
The trait of courage is such a big thing in all of this, I feel, and something which I see in yourself. And
yep.
and I guess the question is mixed with willpower and courage, you know, like...
To me, my courage has had to grow over years. Like, I wasn't very courageous a while ago because I had a lot of fear, right? The more you release the emotion of fear, the more courage becomes present. And the more you don't listen to fear, the more courage becomes present. So I see, and we'll talk about fear later today and tomorrow a lot more, but I see a lot of you choosing fear and then wondering why you have no courage. Well, see, I still have fear. And to me, the courage and fear are not linked to each other. Do we follow? To me, you can have courage and still be in a lot of fear. You can choose to have courage even though you're afraid. In other words, you can choose to not use fear as your God anymore and instead choose to have love and truth as your God, even if God's not your God yet. Right? So you can choose a different God, love and truth, even if you don't believe in God at this stage. You can choose love and truth, that's my God now. Fear, whenever love and truth, I've got a choice between love and truth and fear, I'll always choose love and truth. You can choose that. It's a choice that you make, and you can have courage to make that decision even though you're very afraid. And if you're willing to feel your fear when you do it, it'll release the fear, and therefore the next time you do it, you'll have more courage and less fear. Right? So it's a positive growth then. And so I see, yes, the development of courage is an important quality. However, it is driven by my faith in love and truth. And in my case, for myself particularly, driven by my faith in God's goodness. That's why I have courage. It's not really something that I sort of feel within myself a lot of the time. I only have it because I have faith in God. Does that make sense? Like, to me, this is the trouble with self-reliance. If you just rely on yourself, having courage is very hard. Very hard. Because now you're completely dependent upon your own limitations as to how much courage you will have. Whereas to me, God's an unlimited God with unlimited goodness. If I trust and have faith in God, now my courage will be dependent upon God's feelings, not my own. Now, to me, that means I can do anything. Does that make sense? No matter how afraid I am. Yeah. So these are things we need to work our way through if we're going to work our way through this issue of your resistance to faith.